think it's interesting that you started off as engineering AI, then you changed it. Why did you change it?
So actually, we're still called Engineer.ai,
Oh, you are?
the name of the company. But when we were building the business, we didn't really know what to call it. So we called the company Engineer.ai. We called the platform Builder.ai. And then when we were speaking to customers, they were getting really confused. And what we found out was our customer was not technical. And they didn't want to get engineers. They wanted to build things. And so it took us 2 years to realize that we can't try and launch 2 brands at once.
Right.
It was a very hard lesson. And then we made the switch.
Don't build 2 brands at once as a startup. Not
Yes,
a good idea.
not a good idea.
I mean, new Coke, that was not a good idea. You've gone through a big journey, actually, because you had a startup before, which you exited, which was very successful in San Francisco. And that was also in their sort of enterprise space as well. But this is sort of B2B to C. It's, small businesses can sign up to this platform. It's a slightly different play, isn't it? Why did you see the opportunity to allow people to build their own apps? Because I came across plenty of startups saying, oh, you just go to our platform, just off we go. I mean, what did you see that you could do differently?
I think, Mike, so we started this because we were a developer.
Uh-huh.
And as 2 engineers that studied in a good engineering school, that's like a really bitter pill to swallow. And I think this was sort of when we started to hear from a lot of our friends, trying to build an app, I want to sell my jewelry online, and a bunch of like sort of traditional businesses. And I think what really hit for me was when we started to see everyday small businesses wanting to build software and really struggling, and we started doing some homework. And then I think we took a thesis view, right? So you go from like your personal experiences, and they're like, what's the macro trend? I just remember my first boss when I was at Deutsche Bank, he would always ask me when I wanted to present something, he said, Sachin, what's the macro trend? And I think the macro trend we said is that there's going to be no more digital and traditional business. Everything is going to be digital. And so if everything is going to be digital, it means more and more people are going to build software. And if we think about today, like whether it's Lisbon or Berlin or Munich or London or San Francisco, there aren't enough developers.
And do you think it's because also the consumer trend towards apps, you open up the Uber app and it was just so magical to get a car that turn up out of the blue, that even small businesses would want that kind of experience? Yeah,
and it's been really interesting. So we're seeing small businesses, we're seeing housewives, we're seeing kids build software. I mean, we've had a girl wanting to build Pinterest for butterflies. We've had a mother in Dubai who wanted to build an e-learning system so that homework sheets could be given out to kids during COVID. So what we found was there was a huge amount of creativity, but then it came to like, I need to build this. And as we all know, building software is wicked hard, super difficult. And so we said, okay, if we can make this really simple, like ordering pizza, because everyone can order. Who can order pizza here? In the back, can you guys order pizza? Yeah, everyone can order pizza, right?
Don't do it, by the way.
But if you can order pizza, and everybody can do that, that's like the average technical skill.
Now there was some controversy because there was some media reports saying it wasn't, you weren't employing AI and things like that. But you've managed to sort of get through that. How did you get through that area?
Mike, it was a pretty tough period. You raise a Series A. You're very genuine about when you're raising it. Yeah. You build material. Our investors aren't dummies. Like our Series A was the biggest fund in Asia, the biggest fund in Europe.
It was about $30 million.
It was $30 million. We had everyone from SoftBank's AI fund to Lakestar to Jungle.
And this is before the boom of the
exactly, before the boom. We had VMware, they invested. And we never said to anyone everything was built. So a lot of it was trying to fight with your hands tied behind your back. And we said, well, we never said it. And so it was pretty tough. But, I think for us, the learning point was we just stayed true to the mission. We got granted several patents. We won your Hottest AI of the Year award. The same year we won Cognition X Hottest AI Startup of the Year award. We've built fundamental technology that doesn't exist before we were here. Yeah. But it was tough. It was that August I will never forget.
But you raised in March this year. You've obviously come through a long journey, because this year you raised $100 million in a Series C round,
Yes.
led by Insight Partners. So what was it like to raise this time round? And what was the inflection point? Was it the digitization during COVID?
You know, I think that's a great point. So we came out of beta in November 19. We went into production sort of just as COVID started. And so from April 20, I think we were at 7 million run rate. As of August this year, we were at 169 million run rate. So in just over 24 months, it's almost 23 times. And I think COVID was the reckoning moment for most people. They realized that actually I'm going to survive COVID if my business has a piece of software to run it. And I think the second was COVID was like going to the gym. For us, it was a huge tightening of your waist, making the belt tighter, working out more, eating less, and just getting on with it.
You also had some big internal issues, didn't you? Because a lot of your team is in India, and India went through very tough times during the pandemic.
Yeah, India went through really tough times. You know, again, so for us, COVID there was a number of things that happened. You know, you had this global investment slowdown, and I remember having to do a town hall where I spoke to our team, and I was like, guys, like some of us are not going to be here next month.
Yeah.
Which is a very difficult conversation to have. It's not something you're trained for. It's not something that you learn in a book.
Yeah.
And then to others, I had to say, we all need to take a decrease in comp, and I'm going to give you guys options. And in the same light, I had to say, and I know that options are not going to put food on the table.
Right. Yeah.
But if this works out, your options will be worth something.
Yeah.
And then actually, to me, the silver lining was in 12 months, the options are worth almost 40% more.
Right.
So in our company, people took a pay cut only to get 40% more than their pay cut. And then you had what happened in India, and it was tough. Like, we shut our office down and converted it into a facility. We bought oxygen concentrators because people were getting sick.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you were just straddling lots of things.
That's the background of the pandemic. Are there any other sort of geopolitical events happened? I mean, we've got the Ukraine war, we've got sort of geopolitical turmoil. Do you think that anything else is going on there in terms of how people are, you know, shifting towards digitizing their entire businesses?
So, look, I think there's a couple of things. Personally, for me, we've seen 2 or 3 shocks. We obviously saw the beginning of COVID. We saw the tech collapse in the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
And we were doing a funding round in that week. And it was 2 weeks of sleepless nights because, you know, everybody was quoting what's happening to the public tech stock. And they're like, but we're not a public tech company. And you were just being lined in with everyone else. But, like, we got through it. Then you had what's so unfortunate in Ukraine. And unfortunate is, like, the weakest possible word I could use. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But for us, it was like a train wreck. So we wake up in the morning, is, you know, one part of our platform is we work in 11 time zones with experts.
Yeah.
We have a lot of experts in Eastern Europe.
Right.
We also have a lot of experts in Russia. So we wake up one morning, there's a war.
Yeah.
And, okay, well, now we have 20% experts not available anymore.
Okay.
So we need to go back to the algorithm and say, stop allocating experts to not only Ukraine, Poland,
Yeah.
Romania, because Poland, people were freaking out.
Right.
So they weren't focusing. Romania wasn't as much, but, you know, people were quite concerned.
So you had to reallocate resources.
And then we had suppliers in Russia, and there's no more SWIFT.
Yes.
3 days later. So we can't pay people.
Right.
And all of that whilst you are growing a business at 20% a month.
Yes. And now you raised money sort of 10, 15 years ago, and then in the last sort of 5 or so years you've been doing Builder. What sort of differences have you noticed in the way you've been treated by investors, or you've obviously seen, certainly the European tech scene has got a lot bigger. I mean, what's kind of interesting things, standout things have you noticed?
You know, for me personally, the first time we did a tech company, it was really hard to raise money in Europe. This is like 2001. We were one of the first people in the cloud. And everybody kept asking, like, what is this thing called cloud? We just want to do software. And the US was much easier, much more bold. This time around, we raised the first round of capital in the UK. And so I think a big change has just been Europe's tech appetite.
Yeah.
And rather than just following, pushing the boundaries of what can be invented. I think the second has been knowing how to tell a story.
Right.
I think, and I see this with a lot of founders, and I struggled with this in our first one. My uncle said this to me best. He said, Sachin, when you're the director of the show, you worry about every detail, and if it doesn't go right, you notice it. But the audience, they don't know what's in the script.
Right.
So you've just got to focus on the big picture.
Do you think you've got better as a storyteller, as a founder, in the last few years as a result?
I think I've got better, not only in the story, I feel like I've built confidence. And I think when you tell the story, if the confidence doesn't come out, it won't convert. And I tell you, Mike, I have witnessed the same investor 2 years prior say no, 1 year prior say no, and then over one coffee say yes. The same investor, the same person, the same business.
Right.
And to me, it was just about how sharp you become. And to be honest, I would even say have no tolerance for bullshit.
Do you think investors in Europe have got better?
I definitely think investors in Europe have got better. You see the work that Carlos and crew are doing with Seed Camp and how they're really pushing the envelope at the early stage. You see what folks like Lakestar are doing. You've got a lot of the crossover guys coming in from the US. So the European tech scene is thriving. I'm super excited and bullish about it. And I think that the interesting thing with the European tech scene compared to the US tech scene isn't one tech scene. It's now Miami, it's New York, it's San Francisco, it's Austin. So it's decimated itself by spreading out.
Yeah.
The European tech scene was always the European tech scene. It's still the European tech scene.
Yeah. You do see similar faces a lot of the time around the place. Yeah. What's in the technology side of things, you obviously built this big platform. Do you see any competitors coming up in the rearview mirror? Do you see also low-code platforms are taking off like crazy right now, and that's a space you're operating in. How do you think it's going to sort of shake out?
So I think the macro picture is that for as long as new companies are being built every year, and there's about 100 million new companies every year, they're going to need software. And for as long as everybody doesn't write code, they're going to need either to hire a developer or they're going to use platforms like ours. So I think the market is huge. I think it's $1 trillion market size. It is a bottomless pit of demand. I think the second thing, though, that's really important is we're starting to feel, when you see a lot of low-code, no-code, you still need expertise. If you imagine a Shopify customer, 80% of Shopify's customers need an expert. It charges them between like $5,000 and $30,000 to build a Shopify site. And it's because the average person can't use PowerPoint, let alone build a website or an app. And that's your audience, right? It's the customer that thinks Java is a coffee bean you buy at Starbucks. And if you keep servicing that customer is a bottomless pit of demand. And it will keep accelerating.
I see. What sort of other trends do you see? Do you think that that it's going to be much easier to build this kind of platform in the future, and you'll suddenly be faced with a whole bunch of competitors?
So I definitely think competition is coming. I don't know any market that doesn't have another competitor. I think for us, we've been very lucky from a timing perspective. When we started this in 2016, there was no low-code, no-code. No one had coined the name. And we just said we need a better way to build software. I think you're going to see companies like Bubble, you're going to see others that are like Appian and Uncork at the upper end of the stack. And the market's big enough. It's $1 trillion market. So we can all exist because people will have speciality for different audiences, different regions. But to me, the telling point, Mike, was we did an event, GITEX, where we met. We sold one app an hour in 1 week.
And that's in an emerging market.
That's in an emerging market. It's in one city. It's in an event. which had a smaller population than Web Summit. And so to me, the question is not, are they going to be competitors? The question I always ask the team is, what's the next goal? And for us, it's, we've set a goal for the next 7 years. We want to get to 77 apps an hour.
77
apps an hour in 7 years.
Right.
At 77 apps an hour, we produce 600,000 apps a year.
Right.
So just to give you a sense, we'll produce 10,000 at the end of this year. We are already the single largest producer of custom software probably in the world, or in the top 2 or 3. At 600,000, we blow everything out the water.
But you've also got some big clients, haven't you, with the BBC and things like that. Why would they be using a company like you, though?
The interesting one, our most recent big customer is Microsoft. Microsoft has the biggest development team in the world. It has Visual Studios. It has Power Platform. And it goes back to the core problem that even inside big companies, you have departments, you have regions. Those departments are like small businesses. They're like entrepreneurs. They're not technical. They don't have access to central engineering. And they want to build things. 600,000
apps a year. There's many more businesses than that in the world.
Correct.
And you've just done an emerging market like the Middle East has gone crazy, right? So then there's Africa to do, then there's South America to do, then there's Asia to do. So, I mean, every business wants its own app. So I guess in a way there is, what's the end game here? Are you going to just get bigger, IPO? What are you heading for?
So, when we did the Series A, and it was really funny because it was a small group of us, we sat in a room together.
Yeah.
We said, okay, so we raised this money, what's the goal?
Yeah.
And we sat and we said, how do we get to $1 billion in valuation? And we wrote down all the things that break. And we said, okay, how long is it going to take us to fix? We said about 4.5 years.
Right.
We got there in 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So we sat, the same group plus a few more, sat together again. So how do we go to being the fastest company to go from $1 billion to $1 trillion? What breaks? How long is it going to take? And so we're on that path. The good thing is we don't have to create market. Market's already there.
You're an experienced entrepreneur. You probably feel like you've been there, done that, to some extent. But you meet lots of other entrepreneurs, younger entrepreneurs. What sort of advice do you give them? How do you do any mentoring, that kind of thing? So
I personally invest a lot. So I do about 15 companies a year. My biggest advice to folks is one of 3 things. Stay hungry, stay humble, and master the art of telling stories. And if you do those 3 things well, it is simply a matter of time before you succeed. The second thing I tell most folks, other than that sort of like the traits, is that when you sit at the bottom of a mountain and you look up, it always feels very difficult. To take yourself to the top of the mountain virtually and look down, it looks a lot easier because then you know the way you came up. And it removes the anxiety because I find a lot of founders are very anxious.
Yeah.
And then, not something that I have said myself, but something that I have learned. So I play a lot of tennis. And one of my mentors, and I've learned a lot from him, is Patrick Mouratoglou. So he coached Serena Williams, he coached a few others. And he always said to me, Sachin, when you go on a tennis court, you don't go to win the match because that's an output. You only focus on the inputs. And in tennis, the input is split step, bring the racket to the center, go back to the baseline. Don't look up until you make contact with the ball. If you do those 4 things well, winning the match, winning the point, winning the game is an evolution. Only focus on the inputs.
Right. I see. Well, that's great advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sachin Dev Duggal from Builder.ai.